What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me is the incomparable Mr. Raman Singh. Fresh off a vacation, he's got a tan, he's relaxed, his head is smooth. Raman, what's going on, man?
It was a much needed vacation, but I missed working, believe it or not.
That's
I
a
missed working.
wild thing to say. There's gonna be very few people who agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's I'm a workaholic, so I miss working and I miss my kid. And I think I was telling you, earlier, I see my kid after a week, and I feel like this little kid grew by 10%. It's like, what? It's like your head is bigger, you're chubbier. Like, what just happened?
Hangs out with grandma, comes back visibly chubbier.
But no, good to be back, ready for the for this upcoming cycle. A lot of great stuff happening.
Yeah, I'm excited for this July cycle. I think it's gonna be wonderful. Um, Interesting thing that you and I were talking about right before we turned on the camera, and I kind of wish that we turned on the camera sooner because we were bringing up so many good things. I'm like, damn, I would want to listen to that if I was a test taker. But we have this common phenomenon, and obviously you taught our last CFP prep course with me, and it's always interesting to see how people prioritize the exam and when things get in the way. And in my experience, I found that for a lot of people, the actual material is never really the worst part of the process. It seems like it's going to be the worst part of the process, but it's all the other stuff. It's all the noise. It's all the stuff that gets in the way. Where we have people who come to tutoring sessions, and you know this. I come Tuesday. All right, what did you do between today's Friday? What did you do from our last session on Tuesday to Friday? Ah, Joe, I actually didn't do anything.
Meetings, client meetings. I was busy.
I
Client
was
meetings.
busy, I had meetings, and then, my kid got sick, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and, and like I've gotten every possible excuse from my dog has diabetes. That is not a joke. That is actually something that I've talked to somebody about, to the more common ones, which is I just had a client meetings and work blew up and it was a work fire and things were happening. And oftentimes, the stuff that gets in the way is the bigger battle than the actual material in the CFP.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What do you think that is the case? Like, why do you think people sign up for the exam and then, it makes sense in theory that, like, if I'm going to take on a commitment, I need to clear things out. But why do you think that actually doesn't happen?
Yeah. That's where, as we were talking earlier before the recording, it's like what's getting in the way of your
Yeah.
study, right? That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
right? Or that's what's holding you back from being a CFP, whoever's like watching this podcast, listening to
Right.
this podcast. And I think you and I have different opinions on that, Joe. So I'll tell you what my perspective is. I think it's your priorities.
Hmm.
How are you? Like you may say, okay, the CFP exam is a priority to you. But if you're scheduling client meetings and if you're doing dinners, client dinners, or like yes, you have family, I understand all that. And I know everything is important. When everything is important, nothing is important. Right? We have to prioritize and luckily the studying for the CFP exam is a short-term priority or a shorter term priority versus guess what? Your clients are never going away.
Hmm.
You're hopefully not. I mean, with the given market conditions,
Yeah.
and the family's never going away.
Hmm.
So you have to create a priority of the CFP exam above everything else, and that's where my opinion stands. But I'd love to hear what you have to say to that, Joe.
I think it's interesting because I think it's something that we see with people anytime that they want to do something worthwhile is that, the excitement of it is really cool. And then when the actual work, it's time to do the work, it completely changes. It's like being a kid on Christmas and opening up this giant box and inside of it is a lemon. You're like, what the hell? Like, I thought this was going to be exciting and this was going to be wonderful. It's like, anytime you sign up for like a diet or you're going to start a diet, it's exciting. I keep thinking about my results. I'm going to be skinny and my belt's going to feel great. I'm going to lose weight. My face is going to look better. I'm going to look younger. People are going to want me. They're going to think I'm sexy. I'm going to look better naked. And then it's like day one and you're sitting there chewing chicken and broccoli and you're sitting there going, "Oh, this sucks. Like I'm hungry and I want to eat." And that's when the work shows up. And then, if you want to go out on the weekends and then you want to drink wine and eat pizza, well, then you're not going to be able to lose weight. And I think it's very hard for us as working individuals to really understand what that sacrifice is, especially when you're already burnt out or running on 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a dramatic understatement of what something like this takes because I think we tend to overestimate the amount that we can take on because we never want to say that we're weak, right? I never want to say, "Can you do it, Joe?" Yeah, I could do it. Can you run a marathon? Oh, yeah, yeah, no, I could do it. If I put my mind to it, I can. And it's like saying no or saying that this is too much or I can't handle it is an extremely weak thing. It's not. It's knowing your capacity and what you're able to do and when you're not able to do. I think that is one very giant reason. I think the other reason is just straight up you're scared.
Hmm. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? I'd love for people to kind of look at that
Well,
perspective as well.
you've been around this and I've been around this for a while. Anytime that we're dealing with students and we do an introductory call or an assessment or something, what do people always tell you about how what type of test taker they are?
I mean, honestly, I've heard like both sides. I'd say like, oh,
Really?
I'm a pretty fast test taker, or I take exams really fast. Or some people say, you know what, like I I take my time. So I kind of have like mixed answer about that. But what about you?
I usually get that I'm a really bad test taker.
Okay,
I've
okay.
always been bad at standardized tests. I've always
Sure. Yeah, okay, yep. I
right
see
like
what you're saying. Yeah.
so like most people are coming in and saying like, and I get it. It takes truly, if you think about it, it takes guts to get your CFP because now you're truly putting yourself out there to go through something hard and put time in it and money in it and then come out the other side and actually passing it,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's a part of us that kind of, when something gets hard, you stop trying because it's easier to justify to yourself after the fact. Well, I didn't really try, so if I failed, it's okay.
Hmm.
And so I think anytime that we get scared, it's scary to have to come to class and get pummeled and not necessarily know not what the instructor is talking about, or maybe feel like you're a bit behind some of your classmates, or kind of feel like you're stumbling and bumbling and fumbling through the material. That is not fun. And sometimes that could feel a little scary that, and all those kind of voices in your head start creeping up, right? And this is the stuff that gets in the way of the work, right? This is the stuff, that voice that's saying, you're not going to pass anyway.
Yeah, that voice, absolutely. It gets, we've had students like that in the past, where it's just that voice they put in the effort, but that voice gets in their head. So you know, Joe, I see where you're coming from with that, the fear component, the fear-based component. That's why people don't really bring out their true potential. I feel like there's other people where they're like, okay, you know what, this is a huge mountain that I'm going to climb. This is the Everest for me. I am going to climb it. I don't care what it takes to do it. And I was one of those students.
Yeah.
I failed the test and I was like, you know what? Okay, and I'm retaking this thing. You know, um, but I will say that I've met a lot of people, and I'd love to hear your opinion as well, where they they look at the exam and then they'll say, well, I'm a practitioner. I'm already doing financial planning. Oh, let me just
Mm.
take the questions and kind of come in unprepared because I know I'm good enough to pass the exam because better than most people or whatever. At least that's they won't say it, but that's kind of like in their mind. So I feel like you have those folks as well.
Oh yeah, I mean you do get a lot of overconfident people who mistake being good at their job with being able to pass a test.
Yeah.
And those are two completely separate things. But like and I get this a lot, especially with higher earning folks who, I built a practice. I built it from zero. I have 200. If I can do that, I can do anything. And you're right. But you didn't build your practice from scratch by doing nothing. There
Right.
was diligence, there was discipline, there was work when you didn't want to work. There was Saturday mornings and Sunday nights and working late and getting up early and making phone calls and typing emails and going back and checking things two, three, four, five times to make sure that it was done correctly. That diligence gets lost sometimes. It's like I got really good. When I was in an FA, we used to call it the doctor effect, right? When with doctors who thought they could pick investments because you start feeling like you're saving lives, you start feeling a little good about yourself, and all of a sudden you're like, well, if I can bring somebody back to life, then I can certainly pick a stock. Right. And we dealt that. And, again, as an advisor, I remember sitting across people who were lawyers and I mean, these were smart people, incredibly smart. And I remember sitting across the table one time from a doctor, an infectious disease doctor in New Jersey. This guy was incredibly brilliant, pushing out research, started this medical group, was one of the founding partners, was making 10 times what I was making at the time. And I remember chatting with him about it and going, how did that investment work?
Mhm.
How did that investment work? How did that investment work? Okay. How does the market work? And he didn't know any of the answers to
Right.
that question. So his overconfidence ended up breeding him tons of investment. I remember the market was going up dramatically and this guy was getting his butt handed to him. I was like, okay, cool, man. How long do you want to do that for?
Sounds like one of the psychology topics, right? For the
Right. Right.
CFP.
Exactly. Right. Like, I mean, straight up behavioral finance at its finest, and obviously why they bring it into the exam. But I think that between just being naive to the exam, right? Priorities, like, and I think being naive is you really go in trying to treat this exam like the Series 7.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, I feel like this is another like an hour long podcast to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about that kind of stuff.
Right.
I'll tell you this. I want to tell you one thing about a student of mine that I had real quick, Joe. So basically, this guy, successful, practitioner, does really well in his career. Been in the industry for 20 plus years. I met him 2 years ago, and he's like, "All right, I'll study for the exam. Ramen, I'm going to New York for dinner with my wife, and I'm going to Italy for this." He went to Italy, I believe, two weeks before the exam for like a week, basically, because it was like a client meeting or whatever that case. It took his family there, right? I mean, money was not an issue for this individual. Basically, failed the test, and because he had a vacation planned out after, right, immediately after the exam. He even told me, he's like, dude, like while I was taking the test, I was thinking about my vacation, if I packed my bags or not, or if I packed this or not or not. Obviously he's going to come out failing, right? Once again, as I mentioned, priority, right? This time around, when he took this March test, the guy's perspective changed. Every moment that he had to study for the exam, while he's running a practice, while taxes are like, tax season almost closing up, and he gave that determination, that diligence, to your point, that one needs to do to put in, and he came up passing the test.
That's right.
Same person, just two different perspectives.
I had this with somebody as well, taking not the CFP, but same idea. He was taking the Series 24. And this guy is at the top of his field, right? He moved to a new location to take over an office. He's managing a whole bunch of people. Very smart guy. never dedicated himself to the exam, right? In the process of taking the Series 24, he went to Italy, he went to London, he took 2 trips to go see his family, and then it would just cause all these dips in his studying. So like he would have a week of studying and a week having studying, and he would start picking up and doing well, and then he would take 6 days off. And then he would did it. And so he failed the exam multiple times, and he started getting upset with me, and we had this conversation. I was like, how many times did you come to a tutoring session having finished the homework that I had assigned? And he was like, probably half the time. I was like, zero. You didn't come to one tutoring session actually finishing it. I was like, this exam is not a priority for you. You don't really care about it. And you say all the right things. And here's the thing, you're the easiest person to convince. Oh, I work hard. I'm up early. Oh, I get up at 4:45. The exam doesn't care.
Mhm.
I went to bed at 2 in the morning. Exam doesn't care. The exam doesn't give a shit when you study or how much you studied or how little you studied. Do you know the information? Are you taking advantage of study strategies that are proven, that have worked for people before you and will work for people after you? Because you can't just walk in, do whatever the hell you want, and think that just by taking a bunch of practice questions that the material will be there in my mind. That's who I am. I'm
Mhm.
just a person that figures it out. Come on. Come
Until
on.
you get punched in the face by the
Come
exam.
on. Come on, man. Come on. Like where is like, you know, this is like 10 like cockiness 101.
Mhm.
And then the thing is when you're that cocky, you can flip the switch and get really, really scared too because you're going, uh-oh, I really stepped in it. I talked a big game and now I stepped in it.
You know how many times have people had say, "Man, the CFP exam got me humbled."
It does. It's a humbling exam,
Yeah.
it's just again, you walk in there overconfident, things are going to get in the way. You walk in there that naive, you're going to let everything but the exam material get in the way. And I'll tell you, Raman, more often than not, the things that get in the way outside of the exam are far more impactful than the actual material.
Well said, Joe. I think this is it. This is the key right here.
Yeah. So, with that being said, we hope you enjoyed this episode. With any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to Raman or myself, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Take care, everybody.